There are so many times in life where we have circumstances that are so challenging or so painful or so hard, and we have a lot of different choices in how we could respond in that moment. Choosing to be willful in a situation could look like sitting on your hands, burying your head in the sand, just like wishing it would go away, pretending that maybe it's not happening, as if somehow that could stop it. Willingness instead is being able to acknowledge what's going on, acknowledge the reality of the situation, and be open to accepting it. I see willingness show up in so many small ways in eating disorder recovery. And I think it's important to remember that willingness is in these small details. I see willingness in my patients each time they're sad, they're feeling guilty, they're angry or frustrated, and they just take that moment instead to consider using a skill, trying something different instead of relying on their eating disorder behaviors in that moment. So I'm here with Maris, and I'm hoping, Maris, that you can tell me a little bit about what you've learned about being willing versus being willful over the course of your eating disorder recovery.
Totally. So when I was a little bit into my recovery, this was a past life, learning how to be a yoga teacher. And I remember there was a time where we were giving and exchanging feedback on the classes that we had taught. And one of my teachers would always sit like this with her palms up towards the sky. And it was very distinct because, the rest of us were just kind of like slouched over, not sitting in that way. And so I asked her what she was doing, and she said it was this physical cue to remind her to be willing and open. So when she would notice thoughts come in that would like question the feedback or be doubtful or even self-critical, she could say, well, let's just explore that and just see how I feel about that feedback. And I think that was something that was very translatable to my recovery. And I had all sorts of thoughts coming in all the time. And it was a great reminder to physically position myself in a way that reminded me of the mindset that I wanted to be in.
That's so funny, because one of the skills that we actually teach is this skill called willing hands, where we invite people to just, in that moment where they pause, change their body posture and open themselves up a little bit and just kind of notice the change that comes, which is exactly as you described it, kind of physically this opening or relaxing, so that you can again step back and think about what is it that I need to do in this situation just in this moment. So I'm wondering if you can give an example of when you used this skill when you were in your recovery.
I can remember a time a few years into my recovery where there was a wobble with some old behaviors coming back up. And my parents had to have that conversation of, hey, we're noticing this and we're worried about it. And I remember my initial instinct being to really just like close in, right? And all the thoughts being very critical of like, well, you should be done with this by now, and this should be behind you by now, and they're judging you. And I really did have to practice being open in that way to receive the feedback, knowing it was coming from a place of love and concern, and knowing that it would help me do what was needed to really protect my recovery and to protect myself.